Welcome to Executive Protection Insights. I'm Liam. If you've spent any time in executive protection, you already know this. The job is not what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, people see clean arrivals, controlled environments, smooth transitions. They see a principal walk in, get on stage, leave, and everything looks effortless. It looks planned, predictable, almost routine. Like everything is happening exactly the way it was designed to happen. But what they don't see is how close things sometimes get to going sideways. They don't see the constant adjustments. They don't see the recalculations. They don't see the moments where the plan starts to slip just slightly and the team has to decide, do we hold or do we adapt? Because most operations don't fail in a dramatic way. They don't collapse. They don't turn into headlines. They don't explode into chaos. They just drift. They move from controlled to slightly uncertain to reactive. And if you're not paying attention, that shift happens quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give you a clear signal. It just slowly changes the environment around you until you realize you're no longer executing a plan. You're managing a situation. This podcast is about those moments, not the perfect missions and not the clean textbook examples, but the real situations where things didn't go exactly as planned and what we can learn from them. Because in this profession, experience is everything. But learning from someone else's experience, that's how you get ahead without paying the price yourself. Today's episode is called The Event That Outgrew the Plan. And this one matters because it's not about failure. It's not about someone making a bad decision. It's about something much more common and much more dangerous. It's about when everything is done right and it still starts to go wrong. Let's set the scene. This was a large corporate event in a major U.S. city. The kind of event where you've got executives, partners, media, and invited guests all moving through the same space. It's structured but not rigid, controlled but not locked down. There's energy in the environment. There's movement. There's unpredictability. The venue itself was professional, indoor, well-managed, experienced staff. The type of place that hosts events like this regularly, which creates a level of confidence going in. You've seen it before. You know how it's supposed to work. The executive attending wasn't a celebrity in the traditional sense, but important enough that their presence mattered. Recognizable, influential, the kind of person people notice, the kind of person people want to approach, even if they're not supposed to, which means there's always a layer of attention that follows them, whether you want it or not. The executive protection team had done their work. They had conducted a proper advance. They had walked the site. They had identified the primary and secondary routes. They had coordinated with venue security. They had looked at ingress. They had looked at egress. They had built a plan that made sense. And on paper, it was solid, clean, efficient, structured. Exactly what you would expect from a professional team operating in a professional environment. Now, here's the part that's easy to overlook. When you conduct an advance, you are seeing a version of reality that will not exist during the operation. You're seeing the venue empty. You're seeing it calm. You're seeing it without pressure. You can walk through a corridor without interruption. You can stand still and think. You can look at an entrance and imagine how it will feel. You can convince yourself that this is what it's going to look like when everything is live. But it never is, because once people enter the environment, everything changes. The sound changes, the movement changes, the timing changes, and most importantly, the behavior changes. The arrival plan was simple. The executive would arrive about 15 minutes before going on stage. Not too early, not too late. Just enough time to move in, settle, and be ready. The vehicle would approach a designated drop-off point, not the main entrance, a controlled access area, low visibility, low traffic. That was the key. From there, the executive would move through a short internal corridor, away from the crowd, directly to a backstage holding area. Minimal exposure, minimal interaction, controlled movement. There was a secondary route identified. There was coordination with venue staff. There was a clear timeline. Everything about the plan suggested that this would be routine. And most of the time, it is. Until it isn't. About 30 minutes before arrival, the environment started to change. At first, it was subtle. More people arriving than expected. Lines forming earlier. A slightly heavier flow near the entrance. Nothing that would raise immediate concern. Nothing that would stop the operation, but enough to shift the atmosphere. And if you've done enough of these, you know that feeling. You can't always explain it right away, but you can feel it. The environment starts to feel heavier, less predictable, less compliant, more dynamic, more alive. People aren't just moving anymore. They're stopping. They're waiting. They're looking around. They're talking. They're drifting. The entrance areas begin to fill. Not overcrowded, not chaotic, but no longer controlled. Event staff begin shifting their focus. Instead of maintaining structure, they start managing volume, answering questions, directing people, keeping things moving. And as that happens, the structure you saw during the advance begins to loosen. The clean lines start to blur. The controlled zones start to dissolve. Now the executive's vehicle is approaching. Inside the vehicle, everything still feels normal. Timing is on track. Communication is steady. There's no urgency, no pressure. But as they get closer, the driver sees it first. More activity than expected. More people near the drop-off point. Nothing dramatic, but enough to register. The team lead sees it too. And this is where experience becomes critical. You don't panic. You don't overreact, but you start recalculating. You start asking yourself, if this is the condition now, what is it going to look like in 5 minutes? In 10 minutes? Are we still within the margin we planned for? Or are we already outside of it? The vehicle pulls in, and immediately the answer becomes clear. The drop-off point is no longer controlled. There are people nearby, closer than expected. Close enough that the clean, controlled transition the plan depended on is gone. Now the team has seconds to decide, do they hold? Do they reposition? Or do they move? They move. They bring the executive out, tighten the formation, and begin moving toward the entrance. And this is where the operation changes. Movement that was supposed to be controlled becomes managed. Controlled movement means the environment works for you. Managed movement means you're working within the environment, and that distinction matters. As they move, attention builds, not aggressively, not in a threatening way, but noticeably. People look. People slow down. Someone steps slightly closer than expected. Someone hesitates just enough to affect the path. Someone pulls out a phone. Someone turns and watches. Each of these moments is small. Individually, they don't matter, but together, they create friction. And friction affects timing. The team compensates. They adjust positioning. They tighten spacing. They maintain momentum. They guide movement without drawing attention. Because that's always the balance. Control without visibility. Presence without escalation. They reach the entrance. They move inside. But even inside, the environment is not what it was during the advance. The corridor is not clear. There are staff moving through it. Equipment being repositioned. Last-minute adjustments happening. Questions being asked. Instructions being given. All normal for a live event, but not aligned with the plan. Now timing becomes critical. The executive is getting closer to stage time. The margin is shrinking. Pressure increases. Movement speeds up. Decisions become faster. And when pace increases, control decreases. That trade is subtle, but it's real. They reach backstage. The executive arrives on time. From the outside, everything looks perfect. The audience sees nothing. The event continues. But internally, the operation has shifted. And this is the moment that matters. At some point during that movement, the team understands something. The plan is no longer in control. They are. And that changes everything. Because once you're there, you're no longer executing. You're managing risk in real time. And your margin for error gets smaller. Now let's slow this down, because this is where the value is. What actually happened here? Nothing dramatic, no incident, no failure, but control was reduced, and that's where risk lives. The first lesson is environment. You are never operating in a static space. You are operating in something that changes because people change it. The second lesson is assumptions. The plan assumed the drop-off point would remain controlled. That assumption was reasonable, but not resilient. The third lesson is awareness. Different teams saw different realities, no shared operational picture, and without that, coordination breaks down. The fourth lesson is timing. Small shifts in time create large shifts in conditions, and timing is control. There's another layer, mental load. When things go according to plan, you're ahead. When things drift, you're reacting, processing more, thinking faster, managing uncertainty, and that pressure builds quickly. Now, if we look at how this should be handled today, the expectation is different. You need visibility before arrival. You need real-time awareness. You need alignment across teams, and you need flexibility built into the operation, not created under pressure, because once you're improvising, you're already behind. If there's one takeaway from this episode, it's this. Operations don't fail suddenly. They drift. And your ability to recognize that drift early is what keeps you in control. Because the earlier you see it, the more options you have. The later you see it, the fewer options remain. In the next episode, we'll look at an airport arrival where timing and communication didn't align and how quickly that creates exposure. Until then, stay sharp, stay prepared, and stay operational.